are being ethically and environmentally responsible, they're making more money, they will have no choice but to follow the other companies, whether they want to or not. When I look at almost every positive story about a company that's making positive change, there's a nonprofit involved. Chiquita wouldn't be where they are today without the Rainforest Alliance in New York City. Shell and BP, as much as you might hate them, much of the positive change that they've made is because of Greenpeace UK working with them. We're in a whole new era. It doesn't mean that you don't go out and demonstrate and fight and boycott, but there is an opportunity for nonprofits to strategically help these companies find the right path. Because in many cases, they don't know what to do. Shell does not know how to build constructive relations with the indigenous people in Africa. They just don't know how to do it. People ask me, this is like, everyone asks me, do you drink Starbucks coffee? Will you wear Nike sneakers? And the answer is, I will. Because after all the analysis I've done, I feel like they're moving in the right direction. That doesn't mean we don't need to really support companies like Thanksgiving Coffee. We need to support the local businesses that are building this new grassroots economy. But I don't want to also, there's a real danger that we face in saying, let's forget about all these big, terrible companies. Let's disassociate ourselves from them. They're driving the economy. They're important. We can't give up on them. As much as we need to do our own thing, we need to force them to change.
So the thing that I really want to push here is, how do you begin to mainstream the margins? How do you get socially responsible media to be the norm? Now, I'm pushing Denise to get the Green Festival to come to New York. But the reality is, I would love the Green Festival to be in every single city that we have, and this is actually a normal occurrence as opposed to an anomaly that requires us to raise $100,000 just to get it to a new city. And what that means is that we as a community have got to stop thinking in absolute terms, like we are right, or we are left, or we are progressive, or we are independent. But we really have to start thinking on a continuum, so that if this is where we are right now in terms of socially responsible media, how do we get to the point that we are actually the majority media? In terms of consumers, how many of you here have ever read Utne magazine? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you here have ever read Newsweek? Raise your hand. Okay. Now, what's the challenge there? Okay. You're choosing, we all want our cake and we want to eat it too. So you say you want to support alternative and independent, but then you still go out and buy the majority. And so the same thing here. We all come here. We're going to have a great experience these 3 days. But when you leave here, the challenge is, how are these businesses going to sustain you as customers? How many of you are going to go to Oakland and go to the People's Grocery? How many of you are going to go online and buy some chocolate because that's the only way you can get it when they go on Giardelli's is right down the street? So there's an issue that as consumers, you've really got to understand that you are showing and demonstrating your values through commerce. And so one of the challenges is that I didn't see the Green Festival in the New York Times. I didn't see the Green Festival in the San Francisco Chronicle. We have got to stop preaching to the choir. So diversity is imperative just to be able to build a movement as opposed to patronize our souls and make us feel good inside, but really to bring along a much broader consumer base. The other thing is we've got to share. We've got to share. It's encouraging, as I walked through here and I was overwhelmed by the hemp, and I was overwhelmed by the organic chocolate and the organic tampons and the organic this and that. But I was also overwhelmed that I actually had that many choices. 30 publications dedicated to vegetarianism are not going to make it. And there's a whole bunch of infighting. You're fighting for the same advertisers. You're fighting for the same consumer. You're fighting for the same story. I actually picked up some and then put them back because I didn't want to waste paper, but I flipped through and they all had the relatively same table of contents. So it's extremely important that we begin to figure out how to collaborate, not consolidate, but collaborate. My thing is, think mainstream, act alternative. Because I don't see anything wrong with trying to be like AOL personally. They're huge, they're everywhere, they're making money, they have an impact. Now, do I like the way they do it? No, but I should be able to think as big as they are and do it differently.
What would a factory look like in a place that is a garden? What would a garden factory look like? In fact, we have a model for a garden factory, and it's in Bali, Indonesia. So you walk into the factory gate, you throw the door open, and what do you see? Cows, goats, rice. You see natural buildings. You see earth structures. You see grass roofs. You see chickens. You see ducks. And so that's before you've even got to your locker to change your clothes. Why are there ducks and goats and hogs and fish and all that around the factory? And that's because we grow all the food that is needed by the workers for their 3-course gourmet organic meal at lunch. Say you're one of the designers in the design department. What you also have to do 4 times a year is you have to report to the rice fields in the morning, because you have to plant the crop of rice. Because the philosophy in the factory is if you eat in the factory dining room, then you need to be planting the food. You need to have a relationship to the food. All our factories, all our, IBM, Apple, all have landscapers who do maintenance around their grounds. All these are. We don't need maintenance people in our world. We need farmers in our cities. All this ground, why are we pumping all this toxic waste into, preserving these lawns? A grass wants to grow this high, and we're sitting there spending all this energy whacking it back. So we need farmers.
If we look at the world, if we look through the world 5,000 years ahead and look back on the last 10,000 years of history, we will see there are only 2 phases that the world's economy went through. Phase 1 is called grab it while you can. And phase 2 is called ecologically sustainable business and entrepreneurship and energy and everything. There is no other alternative. And just listen to this little roll call of some of the problems. In the last 50 years alone, we've destroyed 90% of all the large fish in the world's oceans. The way we're attacking our forests, we cut down 900 million trees every year in North America just to provide us with paper. We've burned or cleared 80% of the world's original forests. The increase in CO2 emissions look like, when you go back over just, over 160,000 years, it's just colossally out of control. It's unbelievable in massive level of emissions. CO2 traps heat. The temperature of the Earth is rising. The Arctic ice has lost 40% of its thickness just since 1970. By 2050, the entire Arctic summer ice will have gone, and the polar bears will become extinct, because without the ice, they can't feed. On this particular planet, you can either burn fossil fuels or have polar bears. It's a biological contradiction. You cannot have both. How do we get green energy for the whole planet? And we look, first of all, at the welfare that we give to the fossil fuel companies. The tax breaks, the loopholes, the federal programs, the military protection. When you include the environmental health costs, it comes out to between $200 and $800 a year for every single man, woman, and child. You're giving as a subsidy to the oil companies, arranged through congressional deals and riders on bills that don't belong and all sorts of bizarre stuff. And now we look at the other thing, that the fact that the world's oil supply is beginning to peak. It's reaching the halfway point. And so this is the new oil that's being discovered. It's falling every year. The demand will chase the supply. There'll be more demand than supply. The price will go through the roof. Instead of $30 a barrel, you're looking at $100 a barrel or more. The same is actually true for natural gas supply in North America. The price of natural gas has doubled just in the last 3 years. And it's becoming really unstable. But all of the new power that's planned to be generated is from natural gas. And anyone who buys onto natural gas is going to have total instability in your power supply, because the price will go through the roof. The interesting thing is, hydro stays the same price, coal stays the same price because there's so much of it. We have to legislate all coal mining out of existence. Wave energy is coming in. Tidal energy, I made a mistake on. Tidal energy, I thought it was coming in 30 cents a kilowatt hour. But the new tidal turbine off the north coast of Norway, a place called Hammerfest, which is basically a wind turbine on the floor of the Arctic Ocean, is bringing in energy at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. But you're paying anywhere from 10 to 14 to 20 cents a kilowatt hour, depending which sort of scheme you're on. Tidal energy is like, the tides go back and forward all the time. It's lunar energy. It's caused by the gravitational fields of the sun and the moon together. You can predict when tidal energy will flow in 100 years from now. It's totally predictable. It's very good firm energy. What this is saying is that solar and tidal and wind are absolutely the places to invest, because they're coming in as cost competitive. Just look at wind energy for a minute. when you crunch the potentials of wind energy in America, 48 cents have 286 times more energy than needed. If you add in Alaska, add in offshore, you've got 354% more energy than needed. And if every house was twice as efficient, which you can do tomorrow morning, and every factory was twice as efficient, we've got 7 times more energy than is needed for the entire US grid, using wind energy alone. Solar energy used to cost $500 a watt in 1972. It's now down to $4 a watt, $350 a watt with real everything put together. This is a straightforward PV panel which I borrowed from Real Goods just down. They got a booth in here. If you just 100 miles by 100 miles of Nevada will give you enough electricity for the entire US grid. The big thing that's less sexy is energy efficiency. Solar may be costing